Pulltabs Plus ETAB educational seminar. I'd like to welcome the charitable and fraternal organizations that are here tonight, the members of the Gambling Control Board that are here tonight, Allied Charities representatives that are here, the manufacturers, some of the bar owners that we have here, members of the media, and a special thanks to VFW Post 363 for providing the room for us tonight to host this seminar. We'd like to open the night with introducing to you Al Lund. Al Lund is the newly appointed director for Allied Charities. He's been on for a month or so, and we just felt that because Allied Charities being so active in the industry and having followed the ETABs as well as all of the other issues along, we would want you to see who it is that they'll have as their front man. So Al.
Thanks, Tom. As Tom said, my name is Al Lund. I'm the newly appointed Executive Director of Allied Charities. And it's an honor for me to be here. It's an honor to represent an organization that has looked out for charities for 20 plus years. I started my journey 3 years ago as a gaming manager when the gaming manager at St. Michael Legion became ill. And the executive board asked me if I'd be willing to take a look at that job. I had no background in gaming at all, but I was willing to do that. And one of the very first people I met was Rob. And Rob came and he was our salesperson, and he talked to me about games and talked to me about the resources that were available, one of which was Allied Charities. And he said, you call up this king and you ask him anything. He's been around a long time. And he helped me a lot. And then Rob introduced me to other people, other gaming managers. There's a group that meets monthly in the cities that's made up mostly of gaming managers, but bar owners, everyone is welcome that's involved with this business. And we just sit around and talk about issues that are common to all of us. So I would encourage you, if you have any interest in that, please see me and I'll make sure that you get that information. Allied Charities is extremely excited about electronics. We have worked to get electronics for several years, and we see this as an opportunity to drive our mission. And our mission is to increase the amount of money that we get to help spend in our communities. Extra money for the people in groups that are needy or deserving. So there's nobody else watching out for nonprofits than Allied Charities. The same as there's nobody watching out for bar owners than the MLBA. And in that vein, one of the things that we've done is we're now in our November convention, we've invited bar owners. We have many common issues, common themes, and so especially with all of the interest in the electronics, we've extended that invitation. So you'll see that coming out, and those of you that work with bar owners, please extend that invitation to them, because it would be really nice to have them along on this journey that's really exciting. So I do appreciate the opportunity tonight. We strongly believe that it takes strong manufacturers, strong distributors, and strong charities to keep this going. And we see electronics as a vehicle that can help us deliver what we're looking to do, what we're all looking to do. So I encourage you to come to Duluth. I certainly hope you can make it up there. And at any time, please contact me if you have questions. I don't know that I'll be able to answer them right off, but I'll get the answers for you. So it's an honor to be able to serve you, and thank you very much for your time.
Okay, thanks, Al. One of the concerns and many of the questions that seem to come up with the electronic pull tabs has to do with bookkeeping methods and how everything is tracked. We have Chris Schmidt and Bob Matson from Minnesota Gaming Services here with us tonight. And they have a booth set up on the side of the room. What they do is they work and have clients who are involved in charitable gaming, and at least one or some of their clients have electronic pull tabs and operating at this time. So we reached out to them a little bit and asked them if they could just come up and just sort of share a little bit of what it's been like for them, and more than anything to just assure the organizations that this can be done and that there are systems available. So Bob, if you want to come up, we'll give you the floor.
Thanks, Tom. I've been around the industry a long time and I wear a lot of different hats. But tonight I'm wearing a hat for my business, which is in partnership with Chris Schmidt, Minnesota Gaming Services. We do accounting, consulting, anything that has to do with the industry we tackle. Sorry about that, thanks. We've been, from the very beginning of electronics, in fact, following it from the first time we brought it to the legislature 3 years ago. I've been following it very closely. I've worked with manufacturers, distributors, and charities trying to determine how it's going to work for all of us. There's been a lot of mysteries. We've solved a lot of that. The clouds are clearing and we're starting to get a really good idea of what the electronics are going to bring to us. Of course, we concentrate on the bookkeeping and reporting aspect, and we can assure you that we have the reporting systems available, and we're one accounting firm that does it, but others I'm sure have either accomplished that or will shortly. We have the software programs that have operated without a glitch, so we know that can happen. We take a very complicated issue and we break it down to where it's not as complicated and can answer any questions that you have on how taxes are affected, and whether it's a profitable thing for your organization to get into. We do projections for our clients that project what the future with electronics would be for your organization specifically. So we're very encouraged with the electronics. We're excited about it, and we don't think that there's going to be a tremendous challenge to you as organizations in getting the reporting done properly and understanding how it works, and having the accountability to your members, and finally making the money to the bottom line that you need for the playgrounds and fire trucks and all the other things that we support as charities. So we're just here to tell you that there are solutions. They're there. It can be done without a glitch. We'll have a lot more information at the LA Charities Convention from all the different vendors. And so I really encourage you to make that trip up to Duluth. And in the meantime, we're here to stand for any questions you may have. Thanks.
Okay, at this time, I'd like to introduce to you Gary Danger from the Gambling Control Board. We're very grateful that the Gambling Control Board had sent a representative out, that Gary is working after hours here to maybe tell us a little bit of how the electronic pull tabs had come about, and where it's gone and where they expect it to be, and to answer any questions that you might have. However, there are, in the pamphlet that we handed out, there's a section in there of frequently asked questions, and that's based on the meetings that we've attended, that the Gambling Control Board has hosted, as well as questions that have come across our webpage for us. So, you know, please be sure to take your packet with and look through it later, and that may be helpful. But for now, we got Gary Danger with us. Thanks, Gary.
Thank you, Tom. It's a hard act to follow after Bob and Al. One thing I'll tell you about Al real quick, just a couple months that we've had some experiences with Al. You have a wonderful executive director. Personally, I've dealt with him on a few different things, and he was just an outstanding gambling manager, and he knows how to do things right. So you have a good guy in place. As far as electronics, there's a lot of questions going on, and believe me, it's all the way around. What might be helpful is just a quick history of the world, part 2, not Mel Brooks style, but just real short of how we got to where we are. And probably about 5 years ago, there was a study that was asked to be done of the lawful gambling industry, and just trying to figure out what are some of the things that would help make things more efficient, what are ideas that would be more helpful to organizations to raise more money. And there was a lot of different things, but the top 2 things that came out was tax reform and automation. And automation was to try to bring paper pull tabs specifically into the 21st century, and how to make things more electronic as well as more easier. So when you're talking about electronics, one of the things as organizations that you may want to think about is it's not just the play of the game, but then it's the reporting and the ease of that as well. So there's a lot of different things you need to take into account. So that was about 5 years ago. About 3 years ago, Allied Charities first started proposing some electronic pull tab statutes or changes, as well as tax reform. This past session, we know what happened. The Viking Stadium came into play as well, and this got a lot of traction, and boom, here we go, it's approved May, and now everybody can do electronics if they want. It's never been done in any other state in terms of electronics for charities, and we were scratching our heads too, you know, what are we all getting into? But over the last few months here, since May, it's been crazy, as you can tell. There's lots of questions that have come up, but we've slowly started to master a lot of the answers. And there's becoming a lot of clarity, which is really nice. And so today you're gonna see 3 vendors here that we've all talked to as well. They're very good, high quality, upstanding vendors that some are currently licensed, some are working on that. There are licenses or licensees that are in the pipeline. So a lot of the things that I can talk to you about is just what I know and what I see. And currently there's one vendor that's been approved at this point, and they're working with those exclusive games with a distributor. But that's why we're also eager to see more manufacturers that are in the pipeline to come out too, and there's more exposure and everybody wins. So that happened in May, and here we are. The electronics, the play that you've seen are on iPads, but there's certainly lots of other ways to do things. I always say there's 1,000 ways to skin a cat, and if you talk to a computer guy, how are you going to do something? They have a different idea. There's no 2 ideas alike. And so sometimes there's confusion of trying to get an answer because it depends on how the product's going to be made. But generally with electronics, you're going to have a system where you have a cash register or a POS. You're going to take in money. That employee is going to take like their driver's license scanner, swipe it so they have that person's identity. They load up with the credits for what was paid, and they hand that out. The person plays, they select. There's different games. There's going to be a menu. The manufacturers will all have more than one game. They'll have different varieties, just like you're used to seeing right now with paper. We've seen 50 cents, 1, 2. It can be anywhere from $0.25 up to $2, I believe it is. And that player has credits. So when they take in or give $20 or $50, they have credits. They don't buy a glob of pull tabs at 20 at a time. They're just buying one ticket at a time. So they can go in and out of different games. And there's a variety with all the different manufacturers. They'll win, they'll get credits, and they may play those. But at the end, they're going to come back up to your seller, and they're going to cash out or give you back the equipment. It's as easy as that. There's no prize receipts involved, and that cuts down on a lot of things with bartenders that are trying to sell. As far as reporting, then the vendors are all working on different ways to do the reporting too, to try to combine what revenue has for you so that it could be as simple as someday hitting a button, there's your B2 for your electronics. So in terms of reporting, there's all these mechanisms that are working for you. And there's going to be some differences that you're going to see with paper. Some of the questions relate to posting. Right now, you do not have to post. That's in law right now. Market demand has asked you to post because that's what the players want. But in terms of electronics, if there's no posting, the sellers don't have access to get in to see how many tickets are left, or maybe what's been paid out, or try to figure out behind the scenes, is this a hot deal, so I can call up a buddy and play with that. You're going to have a more perfect game, the gamble is back into the game. Not to say that that's what's going on across the industry paper-wide, but this is one of those things where it works for everybody. It's a more honest game than, in that respect, you can do the reporting very quickly in that respect. We can look in, take a look at games, see how things are going. It works very well. The way the system works is the manufacturer is going to make product. They're going to sell it to the distributor. They lease that equipment to you. And so that is how this works in a nutshell. Everybody can see. The manufacturer, the distributor, you, even the board, can see what's going on. The payment schedule, that the bar owner gets a percentage of the net receipts. The lease of the equipment is going to be based on net receipts. Your taxes are based on net receipts. Everybody has a concern. And so you have many people watching also then checking on each other. So there's a lot of different checks and balances that are in place. And so there's a lot of really good potential that we can see. I can anecdotally tell you that the gambling managers that I've talked to, I've just tried to informally poll, how are things going with at least what you have right now? And they've been happy. There's increase on their paper sales. So whether this is a novelty, whether this is going to have traction, whether it increases sales altogether, that'd be great. In terms of increased paper, perhaps this is a complementary good and not having a substitute effect. That'd be really nice to see. One thing we haven't seen is more vendors with pull tabs, more variety, more selection for you, more competition. So the concern is money, but in terms of upfront money, there's nothing for you. It's based on the lease agreement. The competition, as it occurs more and more, may drive those leases down for you. So there's, again, lots of good benefits that we're starting to see. The gambling managers have also indicated, and I've seen this too, because we can have access to numbers. What we're seeing is about $20 or $25 gets loaded on a machine. And usually, well, over the weekend, it looked like there was about a $45 net per machine. That's low because I think the calculation was taking into account all the machines that are available, and there's no way that 8 machines are going on at every place, or 6 machines at every place, or 12 at one time. So there's been some good success. The 2-day deposit rule has not been a problem. If there is a time where there is more paid out, and you have that too, but on a daily basis, if more is paid out in prizes than sales, then you can net your deposit for the next day to try to determine. So those are some of the concerns. As far as cash, there hasn't been a real incredible increase in cash of startup banks, but it's gone very well. So from those different concerns, we've seen a lot of really good potential, and we're looking at a lot more competition, and we can't wait to see more out there in the field. So, is there any questions, or maybe Tom, I know this morning, or this afternoon, Tom was here, Tom Barrett, our director, was here this morning, and I know that he fielded questions too, so if we miss anything.
Are you up for entertaining some questions and answers?
I'll give it a run, sure, sure. Yes, sir.
Are you gonna have any, one coming in for be approved for a license at tomorrow's meeting at all, or how far are these other potential distributors in getting a product out?
There's manufacturers that are in the pipeline, and we're very hopeful within the next 2 or 3 months that you'll see licensees. We are eager to see more and more out there, believe
Not
me.
tomorrow?
I can only comment if there's anybody on there. Actually, I can't even comment on that, because if unless somebody is licensed, we can't say. Everything's always confidential. If a vendor asks, "Hey, so who's in the pipeline?" I can't tell them that. I think it's safe to say, though, that within the next 2 or 3 months, that you'll have options. When you get to the Allied Charities Convention, I'm sure there'll be a lot of vendors, and I haven't talked to Al, so I don't know who's even set up yet, but I'm sure there'll be quite a few, and they'll be very good. When they come out, one thing is every month, no matter what the kind of a request is, whether it's like a fund loss, or somebody wants to give monies to somebody else, or there's a new license that's been issued, that gets put on our website that afternoon. And so check in usually the afternoon of the board meeting. Word gets around fast, but that's the best way to do it too. Yes.
Gary, 2 questions. What's the average start bank that a charity would need? And then the second question would be, what's the procedure on closing out an electronic pull tab? Do you have to use a distributor to close the bank or close the game?
2 good questions. Cash startup bank. What the compliance folks, I don't know what they've done, if it's $1,500 or what they've been using. But I've heard it's similar to what they're used to right now. And if you're having more games, then that's less. So there's a little bit of a balance there. In terms of closing out a game, there's a few different ways to do this. As you go through your distributor, just like you would paper, you order games. In this case, you could have an option to have what's called an auto reload. So when that game is about to close out, that last ticket is sold, you've already talked to your distributor who set it up, so the one game goes out, next game's all ready to go. You don't even have to call up and say, "Hey, can you bring down a game?" It's just already there for you. We do have in there that there is an ability to shut down a game early, close a game if you would like. But when you have no posting, you have really no inside information with the employees that can figure out prizes and remaining and if deals are good or not, a lot of times it just makes sense to churn, especially if it's at an 85% payout. I don't know of any of the vendors whether they're looking at anything less than 85%, but that's all we've seen is the max. And by that churn, the faster you go through deals, it's more of a volume issue then. And since taxes are based on net and not sales, if you churn, that's fine, because it all comes back down to net. Is there an ability for gambling managers, though, to go into a game, let's say at the end of the night, and say, I want to pull this game and take the profit? Yes, there will be an ability to do that, and you would work with the distributor on that. But again, I think what's going to happen, and what we've seen is, it's to the gambling managers that have a really good hands-on, it maybe even sounds a little disconcerting, but it's even maybe a bit hands-off, in that you can let those games flow through. It's going to keep going. It's a little less work, and yet you can have your eyeballs on everything going on. And so that's where there's some benefits. Yes.
Why the 2-day deposit period?
The 2-day deposit period was something that was in statute. The concern was probably a lot of cash on site, trying to get it off into the bank. What you're going to end up basically doing is making partial deposits. But everything's based on the daily receipts. And if you based it on, let's say, the 4 days after the close of a deal, the maximum deal is 7,500 tickets. So that's basically twice as big as a regular paper deal right now. So if it's going to be based on the close of the deal and you didn't make deposits, you can only imagine double the money just sitting around. So in that respect, that's why there was the rush to get the money in the bank, get your money in the bank. And it's not caused much of a headache in that the gambling managers have, or whoever's going to be making the deposit run, when you're talking about a bar op, a lot of times what's going to happen here is bar owner, they're putting up the startup banks, so you don't worry about shortages or anything. It's pretty much dial up, I need my $211, and get it to the bank. That just sounds too easy. But that's where we're going with the electronics. It just could be that way. You can get in and dial in to see what the status is then, or at least what you made that day. So then you can make your decisions.
But if you audit in the game, you have to close it, correct?
If somebody, very good question, as far as a game audit, if anybody audits a game while it's in play, the standards require that the computer program shuts the game down. So if you have an employee that somehow gets a password they shouldn't, and they start meddling, it shuts down. New game gets put in. So there's a security reason. There's integrity.
Jerry,
Yes, sir.
just want to know if I understood you properly. Earlier you said a maximum of 85% payout,
Yes, sir. 85% payout is the maximum.
so a vendor could have a game out there with less than 85%?
Yes. The games that the vendors propose would just be like the paper manufacturer. You know how there's a variety of different payout structures, different price per ticket, different payout percentage. And so the games here could be 7,500 tickets maximum per deal, maximum 85% payout. And that's all we've seen. And that's, I don't know if I should say it, but that's what I've seen as proposed by prospective manufacturers too.
So if it's less than 85%, that's an 80% payout, where does that other 5% go?
Well, the game's designed to pay out 85%. So just like your paper game, it's designed to pay out. And the ideal net receipts would be at 15%, correct?
Well, I'm just looking at where does the money go? It looks like these are fixed percentages.
But, and I'm uncertain about those percentages or where they came from. I don't believe they came from us.
We don't know yet.
Well, and here's where I'm going to say I don't know, and I've always been up front to say if I don't know, I'm not going to BS, I don't know. A lot of the answers comes to talk to your vendor, because you have 5 vendors, you're going to have 5 different answers. They have 5 different rates. One may have some insurance put into the equation and one may not, and so it depends. So the answer is shop around, as we always say. But it'll, I guess we'll just see how it goes. But you can do the math. It's 7,500 tickets at 85%. If it plays out perfectly, you got 15%. And you know, if you're trying to put yourself as a business guy in the manufacturer's shoes and trying to figure out how this is going to work, because they got to come up with a lot of money in outlay. And so when they're trying to figure things out, they're trying to figure out 15% as things churn. But it's worked out very well, where the games just churn, next one goes in, keeps going, next one in. Organization knows the money that they need, they get it in the bank. Ultimately, they close, and you talked to Bob about reporting. Yes, sir.
You talked earlier about tax reform. Well, I've heard some organizations, depending upon how big they are, will actually pay more in taxes? Is that true?
I have not run the numbers, and that's more of a revenue projection. I talked to the accounting folks. I've heard just the opposite. I've heard both, really. So I don't know. I've never run the numbers. But Bob?
Yeah, some will pay more and some will pay less, depends on the volume of the organization.
I mean, is there will there be some disincentive there to be profitable? Because if the more profitable we are, the more tax we're gonna pay?
It's based on and combined net receipts. So they adopted the progressive philosophy that they had with the previous tax. Somehow, I don't know how taxes are gonna figure into that, as you're gonna pay more taxes as you get to that higher level. I don't know if you pull a break then on the lease or how you work it. Again, when you're working your leases, you work that out with your distributor and figure out how to make that go. Yes, sir.
In reference to these 2 days, in reference to banking, is this 7 days a week, or is it based on a 5-day state working day, or a 7-day working day for the charity? Do they have to deposit on a Sunday?
No, and there's no way to deposit it. So we're always going to call it two business days to try to be in conformity how we are with the regular paper, because that takes weekends and holidays into account.
One other question. You speak of honest games. Take 100%, take all the sites in the state, relate it to 100%. And when you bring up honest games, it seemed like there's a problem with the paper. I realize that sometimes a phone call is made, but I question if it's even up to 5% or 2%. And you bring it up like it's a marketing tool for the new digital.
No, don't get me wrong, and that's a good concern though. I understand. I didn't want to paint a picture of we all got to get rid of paper. That's not at all. And you know what? I've been asked that of prospective manufacturers. You know, is paper going to go away? My answer is that as I've talked with regulators from other states, every year they're still just amazed, and they still ask, what's going on in Minnesota? How can there be so much paper sales? It's ingrained. It's just ingrained here, and it's going to stay. You know?
Do you feel there is a problem in paper games in reference to honest games?
It's not the way they're made. I think what it is every once in a while there are cases where people will do some things to manipulate games, and it's all about potential. And the more secure, there's very good gambling managers out there that are on top of things. They have honest games, and I certainly didn't want to paint it as if it's not. But there are cases every once in a while. There's bad sites, frankly. I see this every day. And there's folks that will manipulate if they get the chance. And so this will help those sites, those groups out to get control.
Hey, we haven't talked link bingo, so the electronic link bingo game is coming. And depending on the size of the site with their seating capacity, we'll just say one that's over 200, they can have 12 units. So if 2 link providers, we'll just say 2 out of the 3 of this room, sign up in the Fridley VFW today, and they put 6 units from this manufacturer and 6 units from this manufacturer here, they can only have 12 in play, correct? It doesn't matter whose machines. Would it be one cash bank, or would they have to keep separate cash banks being different manufacturers? Because I'm seeing link games, manufacturer A could have a jackpot of $50,000, manufacturer B $100,000, and everybody's going, okay, I want to play.
Well, it's all going to come down to accounting systems. And I've heard manufacturers use a word wallet. And so somehow, if that would occur, if it's feasible for an organization to have 2 leases for 2 different manufacturers to conduct bingo, if that could be, I don't know, then it's going to have to come down to the accounting system. So that sale, where does that dollar go towards what system? Because there's a manufacturer, a distributor, all have money. And so it would make sense then to have 2 cash banks for your own sanity. Brings up a good point though, as well as there's limits to the number of machines, at least at this point. It's if you have 200 or less seating, it's all based on fire capacity. You can have up to 6 machines, devices out there for pull tabs, and 6 for bingo. If you have over 200, you can have up to 12 of each. bingo halls can have 50. And some of the things is, well, what does that mean as far as available? And so if you have 6 pull-tab machines out there and one goes inactive, then you'd be able to allow for somebody else to. Some of the things, I don't know if you've seen this in our classes, but one of the things that we're trying to develop is house rules. You're going to have to add on to your house rules when you start talking about electronics. There's things where these devices, if somebody sits down halfway through and decides, oh, I want to eat, and all of a sudden after 10 minutes or whatever the time is set, that'll go inactive, and then they'll either have to go up to the cashier and have them restart it up, or if there's somebody on the waiting list, they're going to get cashed out and the new person's going to go and start. So maybe that'll help break up a fight or two. You know, if it gets good, hey, great, wonderful. But so there's different allowances as far as how many devices you can have. Yes, sir.
Is there a requirement for these electronic games that people identify themselves with a driver's license or something?
They have to provide identification and age. A lot of times what organizations are doing is they have the driver's license scanner anyways, and then they'll scan so that they'll know if this device walks out, they know who to talk to. A lot of these devices, and talk to the vendors, I believe they have GPS locators in them anyways, so ultimately it could be figured out. But these are designed to become door stops. Once they go outside of your range, then there's no use for them.
No, I'm just talking about any traceability then with the amount that you gamble to your driver's license, and the state knows information about your gambling habits.
I guess it would depend on, is there a way for something to happen? I suppose it could.
It would be no different than a pull tab the way it is today.
But yeah, I mean, you have, the only thing about a storage shed that's out in the back 40 with a whole bunch of games in it, with prize receipts that have driver's licenses on it, is you don't have a sales figure attached to it. So there is maybe a possibility, but I think it would take quite a bit of work. And quite frankly, that's not what that's about. The statutory intent was to make sure somebody's 18 and that you had an idea who to go to if somebody walked away with one of your pieces of equipment, because that costs money. And those are the two big things. I know there's a concern for identity, but yeah, I mean, there's lots of driver's license information laying around all over. So, yes, sir.
A moment ago you mentioned house rules. How soon will the Gambling Control Board come up with their recommended house rules for electronic pull tabs and bingo? Because we want to be right, so.
Yep. I know that one of the first things I did was sit down with one of the investigators and try to figure out what are some things that people are going to want to know about as a player. And I don't know if they've done that yet. There was on our website, when you go to What's New, a lot of times at the very top you can go in there and find different pieces of information. Sometimes you can also find the handout for the classes. And so there's information all about everything from starting banks. Just going to take a quick look here. Looks like they put some reporting together so you can get a flavor of how that'll work. I don't see anything here yet about house rules, but one of the obvious ones would be let the player know, hey, if you're not going to play 10 minutes later, this thing's going to have to time out. You're going to have to go up to the cellar and either cash out or get restarted again. That's a big one. But we will put something out shortly. Yes.
So
if I may, just before too, a month ago there was 5 sites that had electronic, and as of right now, there are roughly 30 in operation, with about maybe less than 10 probably really close to starting up. And I'm seeing that they're starting to get all over the state, so there may be a spot near you and go talk to the gambling manager too, or take a look to see as far as some ideas. Because you know how that works. As soon as something happens, you react and solve that problem by getting it onto house rule. Yes, sir.
So no prize receipts on electronics? If we come up $500, I just pay them out $500?
Well, there's no prize receipts. So what happens is they get credit, and they can decide to keep playing.
Well, right.
And then ultimately they cash out. There's no prize receipt.
So it doesn't matter, on the paper ones, we gotta have receipts filled out, and make sure that everything's above board, but here, no prize receipts,
Credit-based.
None.
The bank has to balance at the end of the night.
The bank
Oh,
doesn't,
right.
right, exactly. But there's, the vendors are gonna have their computer software to design the games so that it would be like the paper. It's going to be under the limit, so you don't have that automatic IRS reporting. And so it becomes a credit. If they want to use it, great. If they want to cash out, they can do that too. Yes, sir?
If the bank doesn't balance at the end of the night, you gotta make that bank good. How many banks do you need? 2, or do you need just 1?
You can do a couple different ways. Whatever is going to be the easiest for you. You could do one. I've heard of cash register systems where you're keeping track so you know what relates to electronics versus paper. If it's a bar op, that's the bar owner's problem. So you can do a couple different ways. Most important is that if there's going to be shortages, that you have that accountability. Now, a lot of times here, you're going to talk to the vendors, find out, put in a PIN, you're going to give your sellers a PIN number, so you'll know who's been on shift. So you'll know if something is gone on so-and-so shift all the time. Well, there's a correlation there. So that helps you manage. So it's up to you in terms of cash banks. It's your business. You want to run it and make it as efficient as you can and yet as helpful as you can too. Yes?
Is there a time frame for the electronic bingo?
Electronic bingo, there's nothing currently that's licensed for electronic link bingo. And
Is it in
so
the works, or?
we're eagerly awaiting to see. And yes, I'm sure it is. We've talked to many vendors. There's been a lot of interest, and Director Barrett and myself have talked to a lot of potential vendors that are interested in pull-tabs, bingo, both, and still haven't even applied. But there's a lot of prospective ones too. Yes?
You mentioned earlier you can net out a loss, which you can't do in the paper. At least that's what we've been told by the Minnesota Department of Revenue. So on electronic pull tabs, we can net out a loss.
You can. At the end of the night, let's say you lost $40. The next night, $200. So you can put $160 in the bank. So you can net out. Not a problem. We've talked with revenue. We're working with them a lot in terms of reporting. The concern is barcodes. You send in lots of barcodes right now, whether they scan them in or not, in terms of an open inventory. What do we do about barcodes? There's no barcodes on electronics anymore. So we're trying to work it out so that the reporting is still going to be the same. When a vendor sells their games in their system to the distributor, they report the revenue. Hey, this game came into Minnesota. The distributor sells that game. They report over to revenue. Hey, this game went over to so-and-so organization. And then you would report, but there's going to be a way to report because there's no barcode so that everything will still fall through and the cross-check system will work.
So nothing has changed with paper then? Still the same? We can't net out losses in paper?
Revenue told you can't net out?
Compliant.
Yes, that's what we were told in our last compliance review. We couldn't do it, and they were adamant about it.
Really? Okay.
Please tell us we can.
I had talked to Chris Mao, and he said it's the same as paper. So that surprises me what you said.
No, I've added a compliance review also.
Okay.
years ago, but.
And my compliance review didn't have a problem with it.
We haven't had one.
So, and one of the things I said to Chris is, every time you say the words same as paper, that's good, that's an easy answer. And that kind of brings around the whole philosophy of bringing paper into the 21st century by electronics, and yet there's that consistency. Yes, sir.
Well, when you say the same as paper, if there's no barcodes for electronics, then how come their new barcode form has a line for paper pull tabs and electronic pull tabs?
And revenue is digging right now through answers as well. I am happy to report they called and asked to sit down and talk, because there's a lot of things that they want to get worked out. You know, they have some concerns too, and they have, the world turned a little bit upside down on them, I think, because when taxes are based on net receipts and when games close, they're waiting for money now rather than getting it up front. So they have some concerns, and but the way is to make this work easiest for everybody. Yes, sir.
Okay, say we got a machine, and we got 5 games on, we start with $2,000 bank. Okay, 2 days I gotta have money in the bank. What game do I put it on? I just go through there and say, this game, we did $400 worth, you know, last night, so I deposit $400 into that game at the bank so that you know which game I'm depositing that?
Ultimately, you end up talking with the accounting, because when you report the game, it's going to be closed out on a B2, and you're going to have partial deposits. But in terms of reporting, there'll be a way for you to separate those out if you need to. Tom, are there questions that you recall that Director Barrett fielded that? It's right here. Yes, sir.
One of the forms that I've seen is you put person's name and I think driver's license number and all that sort of stuff when they check out the device. Is that required, or is that just use that information for anything? Or?
I think, thank you. That goes somewhat to the gentleman's question over there as well. There was a lot of clamoring for forms and guidance with electronics. So as we first tried to figure out, well, what do we do to help organizations as they're checking out machines and loading them up for people? Well, how about this? Usually people have a driver's license scanner. Boom, here's a sticker, and we know that's over with device number 1 and who has that. That's the easy thing to do. That's the easiest for bartenders and a lot of people short on time. Is it required? They have to present ID, and it has to be recorded. I believe it's name and age. That's the easy answer why we did it this way, because then you had a tracking mechanism, which is, again, goes back to your money and asset walking out the door, and so that you had a way to locate.
So you're required to have some record keeping of who checked out the devices and when? It doesn't have to be that form, is that what you're saying?
It doesn't have to be that form, but you have to somehow show that there's an ID. That's the easy answer.
So they have to show that they provided an ID when they checked out.
Yes.
That's the only thing you need.
Yes, they have to, I can't remember the exact wording, but they have to register. The word was register, so you're going to have to keep a log of some sort. So we go back to the easy answer.
Hey, Gary. So I rent a machine. I give you my driver's license, it's logged out, it's to me. I get distracted, I leave it on the counter, and I go over here and I'm talking, and it disappears. And this is an iPad device, and somebody thinks this has a value. What happens? What happens when this device disappears? What happens, number 1, to me? Am I responsible for this device to the organization? 2, what happens with the organization that just lost a device? And 3, what happens to the person that steals it if they get caught?
Well, currently, if somebody steals, it's listed as a misdemeanor in law. I know at one time they pushed for felony, but because of the way the stadium bill was moving, that would have been a whole nother hearing and a holdup, and so that was a misdemeanor. So people that steal, it's misdemeanor. At some point, there's changes, there'll be recommended changes from the industry, trial and error. There's gonna be some things, and we just know that's the way it works. So that individual then could be responsible. Like any other case, it would be work to find out, is this a crime? You know, could they be held accountable? Again, it's supposed to be a doorstop. It moves outside of the Wi-Fi range or whatever, and there you go. They may think it's gonna have value, but it won't.
What's his responsibility?
Well,
When he comes back and says, I don't have it.
Well, the distributor is going to lease that equipment or even buy it from the vendor. And there may be insurance, it depends on how that works with the whole arrangement as well. The organization and the distributor work that out. Yes?
Whose responsibility is it for the Wi-Fi? If our bar does not have Wi-Fi in it, do we get it? Does the bar have to provide it?
Very good question. Who has to provide the Wi-Fi? The law requires that it's the bar owner that has to come up with the connection, and that includes the router. Tom, you're the technical guy, right? But that's basically, I believe, the Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
Help me out, guys.
The internet will come in, and then we'll hook up a router to it. From there, that'll project to the rest of the terminals.
Okay.
Essentially.
So that router kind of creates a globe, and that's your area. And so that's the way Wi-Fi runs. And the bar owner has to take care of that. It's going to be up to the vendors and probably the bar owner working with the vendors and the distributor to find out what kind of a connection there needs to be. They might have a connection with an ATM and a few other things on it. Maybe that isn't secure enough. Maybe that isn't going to guarantee a really strong connection to make sure the gambling doesn't get impaired and go down for some reason. But that's their deal.
So then, lease-wise, you know, if our bar owner says, well, I want more money because I got no more money, it's same, lease is a lease?
The lease is a lease, and there's, if I remember right, it's 10% if things are going on from a booth. If you have a
Right.
booth and you're selling out of that booth, it's 10%.
Right.
If they're doing it behind the bar, it's 15%. The fun begins when it goes from booth, they're selling for a while, you gotta keep track of the sales to figure out the 10%, and then off, you know, it goes over to the bartender, and then when they're working on things, it's 15% of that. And there's a way to figure that out, but that's, again, that, you know, the vendors are smart, they put programs together to help you try to figure out what relates to what, so you can figure out your lease. Yeah, one last question.
I'm new to the whole gambling, just started a month or two back. I just want to clarify this. So the lease for electronics is completely separate from the lease for paper, is that correct? So in other words, we would pay 10%, not to exceed $17.50 for our paper business, so to speak. And then if we were to run a booth-operated electronics, that's an additional 10% based on just the electronic games?
It's all built into the lease form that we've created. As far as the electronics being on top of the paper, I don't believe so. I think that's all part of the same. So, we have it in our lease form, it's already in the structure, but you'll have two different leases. You'll have a lease with the distributor or distributors as far as the lease of your equipment that in the system that you're running. But you'll also have then a lease that you have with your bar owner right now. And they'll all be laid out, but there won't be a separate lease relating to electronics. It'll all be built in so that it can all be calculated for you. Tom, I'll hand it back to you.
I have one more question, real quick. If what you said is true about we can go below 85%, wouldn't that be in the advantage to the bar owners, the charities, and the distributors? Because everybody's going to be making taking a bigger cut then, right?
If you wanted to pull a game early so that it doesn't generate 85%.
Say we only wanted to pay 75% like a regular paper game.
Then the vendors, they can put that out there, and just like the paper games, 75% game, if that's something that they offer, That's something you could buy, put it on your system. Is that more net, right? More bigger pie, right? It could be 25% net versus 15. You know, that's the same as paper right now. Whatever the games are that are offered and available to you, you can purchase. And these games don't list a payout percentage sometime on a flare. So, you know, if that's a option for you out there that the vendors have, you're just like paper, you're welcome to select whatever it is you want to buy for your games.
See, the problem that I see that, not that bar owners ever have any undue influence over gambling managers. I can see that happening. You know, the pressure to put down a smaller payout, which is good for the charities, but it's also good for the bar owners.
Especially when you find out.
Sure.
One last point to that. If you're paying 75% games and everybody else around you is paying 85% games, and the players think, gosh, I don't win as much at your place. It's a market demand. It's all competition. It's up to you.
Gary.
Okay, thanks, Gary Dane. Gary's presentation was real informative, and we've attended quite a few of these, as I said earlier, and Gary seemed to cover a lot of territory there, and we appreciate him coming up here. He said that he'd hang around for a while yet tonight, and that can be valuable too, because we find sometimes when you get a chance to mingle with each other, you start thinking that, you know, coming up with, you know, what about this or that? And he'll be around, and Gary's real approachable, so thank you for that. What we want to do now is introduce the vendors that we have here. Now, at this time, the vendors that we have submitted applications. They've indicated and told us that they've submitted applications or are going through the process for licensing by the Minnesota Charitable Gambling Control Board. I think that when Gary was up here and was asked about, you know, well, when is there going to be more choices? And we feel choices for the charities could be a good thing. Right now it's real limited as to where you can get the equipment and how you get into electronic pull tabs. And, you know, our feelings are on it is that if you can wait, do that. Because if you wait, you'll probably get a better deal. Because the market, when there's more product provided in the market. I think the reason that Gary couldn't really talk about it too much is because it seems, to me anyway, that if you ask the Gambling Control Board who's licensed to do something, is this organization licensed, is this manufacturer licensed, they can tell you who's licensed. That's public information. But it's private information or confidential information to tell you who's applied for the licenses. So it's not until that license is issued does it become public information. I think that's where, you know, in all fairness to Gary, I wanted to point that out and not make it seem like he was holding back for any reason. Over in this corner, we have a pair of vendors that have become aligned with each other. One of the groups is International Game Co. They've been around in manufacturing paper pull tabs for as long as I have known, and decades. They've been licensed in the state of Minnesota since the beginning of charitable gambling in Minnesota. They got a fine line of paper pull tabs. They also have an electronic pull tab unit that is in console form, and that device does not meet the requirements of being a handheld unit in the state of Minnesota. International Game Co. has placed over 5,000 of their units throughout the U.S. and the international market. But again, that product's not allowed to be used here. So they've aligned themselves with EGS, it's Electronic Gaming Solutions. They've been in business for 15 years. They're headquartered out of St. Louis, Missouri, and they have 15,000 handsets that are located in 16 states as well as on cruise ships that float around the world. So their hope is that they'll bring their two companies together and their two products and their knowledge, and they'll offer another choice, another option for the charities of Minnesota to get into the e-tabs as well as the linked bingo. Over here we have Powerhouse Gaming. They're headquartered out of Loomis, California. They have 15 years of experience. Their experience in manufacturing and supplying e-tab systems and charitable gambling supplies. They'll be all new to the state of Minnesota. And we would welcome. In the back of the room we have Epic Software. They're from Billings, Montana. They're a manufacturer of complete e-tab systems. They have 15 years in the experience in the gaming industry. So at this time, we'd like to just let you all browse